Welcome back. This is News Central, and of course, my name is Mazino Appeal. My co-host here, Judith TB, and we have with us guests inside the studio. I will be introducing them soon. It's still our live coverage of events happening across the country as we take a coverage of the End Bad Governance protests that have rocked Nigeria. This is supposed to be day 4, as we've seen 3 days of protests, and the president finally addressing the nation on the 4th day of what should be the protests for End Bad Governance. In the studio here with us, we have Mr. Olufemi Lawson. He is the SSA to the Ondo State government, Governor on Public Enlightenment. And also we have Stephen Agedo. He's an activist and has been very prominent in the protests in Lagos, here especially in Ojota. Gentlemen, you are both welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you for joining. Let me start with you, Mr. Agedo, and ask you, the president has now made his address, and we've heard him. And one of the things he said was, I hereby enjoin protesters to call off their protest, and I am open for dialogue. Are they going to call off the protest, or are you protesters going to call off the protest and will be willing to enter dialogue with the president?
Well, the president just spoken, and in his speech, he has won my heart because he took responsibility of the previous government and his government. Across board, the Congress will sit before today runs out to see maybe to further more out the agitation on street or not. So let's still wait. We have a lot of coalition of civil rights society that is involved on this protest. So let's wait and see before today the press will know our next move.
Mr. Femi, again, many thanks for joining us. I would also have to ask you about the presidency's speech. What do you think about, first of all, the End Bad Governance protests that have been happening in the last 3 days, and also with the presidency's speech? People have been clamoring for him to address the nation, to address the protesters, and albeit 3 days, he finally addressed the nation. What are your takes? What is your take in the entire course of events that have unfolded?
Thank you. I think we are beginning to make some progress, especially if you have lived in this same country some couple of years back when, government was practically deaf and dumb to issues that affect the citizens. In this country, young people were out there for over 20 days demanding for the proscription of the then, Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the Nigerian police. Government never took it upon itself. We had a president in this country who was just there in Aso Rock, not minding what happened on the street, until a lot of young people were eventually, massacred at the end of that protest. And of course, the subsequent destruction of public utilities, loss of lives of security agents and the like. So I think, unlike the past, President Tinubu should be commended that Nigerians have demanded that, no, Mr. President cannot keep quiet, come and speak to us. And he has done that this morning. I think it's a departure from the past. And another thing is that, we have often said this, that the fact that people want to protest, it's not even an issue of debate. It's a fundamentally guaranteed right, constitutionally guaranteed right. But at that, of course, it is not also impossible that people may choose not to, as the case may be, based on their preference. So very unfortunate that the protest has taken a very dangerous dimension in some part of the country. But for those people who have conducted themselves peacefully, particularly in Lagos, during this protest, for places where citizens feel like, we need to engage rather than going to the street, like Ondo State, for instance, where, it was not because people didn't come out, that you didn't find people protesting on the streets. It's a result of engagement that have been happening between government, citizens, across board. So far, we must commend the fact that largely Nigerians have tried to make it a peaceful protest, unlike, those unfortunate situations that we've seen in some part of the north.
You spoke specifically about Ondo State and the fact that there were no protests on the street. Well, there's a difference between protest and support. Are the people in support of the protest? And what about the government as well of Ondo State? Are they also in support of the protest? Are they in support of protesters' rights to protest? If they wanted to come out on the streets, would they be allowed to do so?
No, nobody would have stopped anybody from coming out to the streets. If you know the history of Ondo State, one of the most politically conscious states in this country, we have the people who are enlightened, and we're respected for that. But the decision not to hit the street, like I said, didn't just happen overnight. Protest is usually driven by groups, just like civil society organizations, professional bodies, labor union. And so for a government that have spent over 2 weeks prior to this August 1st commencement of the planned protest, engaging students, engaging youth organizations, religious organizations, market women, everybody bringing their demands.
So that was done in Ondo State?
Yes.
Okay.
And this was spearheaded by the governor himself. He didn't constitute a committee.
So do you think that the president could have taken some sample from exactly what happened in Ondo State? Do you think that the president should have perhaps addressed the nation from before now, not wait until today?
Well, of course, he failed to do that, but I think he acceded to the call. Unfortunately, of course, it should have. No, President, this is not the first time the president is coming out to speak on this. We realize that even before the protest, there are a number of occasions that there were statements from the president promising to address the issues, the concerns that are being raised ahead of this protest, appealing to people not to protest, even though people still chose to exercise that right in peaceful manner in some places. But lessons must be learned, and now the president himself has said it, that is what open to dialogue. Dialogue is what states like Ondo has been embarking upon before August 1st, and that is why virtually everyone thinks we need to actually go to the streets.
Mr. Olufemi, I'm going to put my pad down here so we can talk about this in depth. Now, it's very interesting that the Ondo State government took upon itself to address the issue. So the president waited 3 days until he addressed the nation. You've noted that while you said that he actually won your heart out because he kind of like supported the protest, or didn't he, when he said it's your right to actually go out there and support. You speak of the president, well, delaying his response to the people. However, my question now is it right that he took so long to address the nation? And his body language from before, sending out statements, I'm using your words now, was it the best thing to do instead of address the nation immediately or from weeks before?
Well, a lot of people would have thought, especially people in government, many would have thought, of course, appeals coming from religious organizations, even some civil society groups chose not to be part of this protest, and of course state government across board, members of National Assembly. Some people would have thought that maybe these planners of this protest would have taken to that and there won't be protest. So it's not impossible that he may have waited to see if truly Nigerians are coming out on August 1st. But yet, like I said, I can at least on a number of occasions, once or twice, I've read statements from the presidency appealing to Nigerians, and promising to address these issues that are being raised. That nonetheless, it is good that now he has admitted that he holds Nigerians that duty of speaking to them. I always want to refer to the past, because if you're actually here and if you look at where we're coming from, you come to realize that we're making progress as a democracy, especially when we're now beginning to have government responding directly to the agitations of the citizens.
Now, in the meantime, we've just been informed that we have Sanyaolu. He's a national coordinator, Take It Back movement, and is part of, he's one of the frontliners, front faces and the prominent voices of the hashtag End Bad Governance protest at the Ojota grounds in Lagos. Sanyaolu, many thanks for joining us. We appreciate you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the buzzword has been dialogue. I've been hearing dialogue for the last 2 weeks. Quite frankly, I do not know if I want to continue using that word dialogue in my vocab after this month. But dialogue has been the buzzword. And now the presidency has said that, he's asked and enjoined our protesters to call off their protests, leave their streets and go back home. And he's open to have dialogue with protesters to come together to bring Nigeria or to meet the demands of the protesters. And I have to ask, does dialogue produce results? Have we seen in past or time before that dialogue somehow produced the desired results for both parties? What's your take on that?
I think President Tinubu's speech is nothing but insult on the Nigerian people. His speech did exactly nothing to address the fundamental issues or demands of protesters. I am at loss when one of the speakers here, specifically, two of them particularly, but specifically Ken Diagedo, says President Tinubu won his heart with that speech. But I'm equally not surprised because it's the same person who also commended Governor Sanyaolu, describing Governor Sanyaolu as a victim of circumstance after the governor was deeply involved in the shooting and killing of hundreds of protesters in Lagos. What exactly did President Tinubu want to dialogue over after he failed to take responsibility of more than 30 people that have been killed in the last 3 days? Just yesterday in Kano, peaceful protesters were massacred, particularly 13 people were killed, including women and children. The president's speech refused to take responsibility for that. People were killed in Borno, people were killed in Kaduna, people were, the massive repression that had happened over the last 3 days in Abuja. The president has failed to take responsibility for these actions. And it is quite sad to the extent that none of his speech acknowledged the pains of the Nigerian people, especially as it pertains to some of the failed policies of subsidy removal. Everything except for except for the fact that the president read out a bunch of statistics that spoke exactly nothing to the plight of the Nigerian people. He spoke nothing to about how
Sanyaolu, I'm very. Let me just make this very clear here that the president, he sent bereavement to the families and the friends of those who lost their lives, and he mentioned the states of the places that they lost their lives. Saya, just give me, Mr. Juwon, can you just give me a second, please? Mr. Juwon, we can keep talking over each other, or just give me a sec. He sent bereavement. He said heartfelt bereavement to the families of those who lost their lives during the protests. And he said he understood why people were protesting. He said that he understood why, and he's here to address the issues, and he's open for dialogue. But what's interesting about your submission and Mr. Agedo's submission is that, Mr. Agedo, whilst you say that you respect you are happy about Mr. Presidency's speech, Sanyaolu's submission he says that it's an insult to Nigerians. What do you make to that comment? There seems to be some sort of confliction here.
I'm entitled to my stance and my opinion. Secondly, I never said all Mr. President stated today is right. I only said for the fact that the president is the father of the nation, it deemed it fit for him to come and address the protester, the Nigeria at large. All Mr. President stated in his speech does not really have not even met the demands across board. So for Juwon coming directly that Mr. President, what I said, he won my heart. In the era of NSAS, we did NSAS for a couple of days. Did President Buhari left the villa to address the nation? The president just addressed the nation on the particular subject matters. And I applauded him for him. I applauded him for his speech. That does not mean the president did the needful.
What do you think was lacking in the president's speech?
Wow. First and foremost, is an hashtag bad governance.
And bad governance.
The president did not treat the main issue, the desire of Nigerians at large. He promised us, this government promised us change since 2015. In the area of insecurity, corruption, banditry, a lot of things has happened so far for the past 1 year in Tinubu's government. As the Tinubu prosecuted the Minister of Women Affairs, Stella. What was that woman's name now?
I keep forgetting her name. She's at the tip of my tongue. But let's go ahead, Minister.
Poverty, Minister of Poverty.
That's what better I do.
There's an indictment to Tunjo Ojo and what have you. There's a lot of things. You came in the day of inauguration day. You said subsidy gone without any preparation for it. There's a lot of things that is why I said the
His move won your heart because of he came out as early as
Yes, so he shouldn't get it twisted as if I'm supporting the government or I support APC government.
I don't think it's about APC government. I think it's about...
No, what I said on live TV is, for the fact that Tinubu came outside, he took responsibility of his misdeed and said, Nigerians, I feel your pain. He wants my heart. That is for me. That is my opinion.
In summary, for him coming out to address the nation, that's a score. However, he did not address the nitty-gritties of the demands by the protesters.
Yes,
now,
and Tinubu has failed the populace of Nigeria with that speech.
So it's not exactly a pass mark.
It's not his pass mark.
Now, let's address the protesters themselves, the leadership of the protesters, and perhaps maybe divisions that might be. There are arguments that there are divisions inside of the quote, Congress for the protests. It's expected that there are very many people who are spearheading these, but not one coalition. Regarding the rancor that might be stewing inside of the protest, how would it affect the protest onward? And is there or isn't there any such rancor?
I didn't think so.
So the organization is not... I mean, because we've seen organization being a bit scattered, or that's a rumor that we hear.
No.
So are you guys cohesive together?
There's still unity, and we have our common goal and our common target. Let President Tinubu reach out to the demands being sent across the board, and let the government do the needful. It's a no-fat, it's a product of struggle. Aluta brought Tinubu to where he is today. So to whom much is given, much is expected from. So there is no division among the agitator of end-back government or hunger protest. I've said it earlier on that before today runs out, the Congress will meet and know next move, way forward in respect of Mr. President's speech today.
Mr. Juwon, if you're still there, can I ask you this question here regarding the timeline that is expected for most of these policies to have come to fruition? The president stated some of his achievements. However, the argument from you and some other protesters is that these are not the things that ought to have been addressed. What we need addressed is the hunger that we're facing, our pockets currently, the exchange rate, the inflation, and all of that. But many also argue on the part of the president that you need time for these policies to take effect and get the country on its path again. Regarding that and that timeline, what do you have to say? Mr. Juwon, please.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let me start by saying that how can President Buhari coming to address protesters at the villa, how can that be an achievement? Buhari, during the NSAS, addressed Nigerians in October 12, 2020. And afterwards, he ordered the shooting of protesters on October 20, 2020.
Those are heavy allegations, Juwon.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let's go straight to your question.
Yes, regarding
can you repeat that again?
Yes, I'm asking regarding the timeline for these policies to come to fruition and how the protesters are addressing them, perhaps maybe also taking that into consideration.
So yes, I was also going through the president's speech, and most of what were listed there were nothing but statistics. But I'm going to give you a bit of Tinubu's achievement. Tinubu's achievement as at now is that he's paying workers slave wages. Tinubu's achievement as at now is that food inflation is at over 40%. Nigerians cannot afford food. Tinubu's achievement as of now is that electricity tariff has been hiked. It is no longer affordable. And because of it, many small businesses are closing down. Tinubu's achievement is that today fuel price is way over 1,000 naira. The implication of it is that cost of commodities have skyrocketed, and Nigerians cannot afford the poorest of the poorest food, which is garri. Tinubu's statistics is that millions of Nigerians are now living in multidimensional poverty. These are the statistics before us. Tinubu's statistics is that several young people, Tinubu's achievement is that several young people are dropping out of school. because of the wave of fear hikes that have engulfed many tertiary institutions. So I don't think every statistics President Tinubu has read out in his speech has fundamentally addressed exactly what Nigerians are going through: biting inflation, hardship, lack to access to education. I think these are fundamental issues that the protest is addressing. And President Tinubu has done nothing other than to gloss over the issues and dance over the graves of over close to 40 persons that have been killed by the police in the course of this protest.
You keep calling out these numbers, Juwon, but we cannot, we have to fact check those numbers. So you keep calling out these numbers.
Yes, okay, according to, let me be specific.
Yes.
According to Punch newspaper, Punch newspaper 2 days, was it 2 days ago? In 48 hours of the protest, the government killed 11 people. 11 persons after it, on the first day of the protest, 11 people were killed. This was Punch newspaper yesterday. Sahara reporters reported that 13 persons were killed in Kano, including women and children. We also saw the video how the police vehicle rammed that peaceful protesters.
Juwon, I think you might have gone astray of the question I asked initially, and I'm going to repeat it again. Regarding the policies that the president stated that are on ground, are the protesters putting this into consideration regarding the timeline that it might take for them to be achieved? He has stated that these policies, especially some he stated like the youth-friendly ones, the loans for businesses and all, are they being considered when it comes to the context of the End Bad Governance protest?
What I'm saying exactly for now is that look at the Tinubu's policies within the last 1 year has already achieved its essence. This is the result of Tinubu's policy. We don't need to describe any elongated timeline. In the last 1 year, I'm spelling to you a timeline of what Tinubu's policies has already achieved. And this is exactly what it has achieved. So a further timeline on the path Tinubu is going and is not willing to repent. In the next 1 year, in the next 2 years, Nigerians will be poorer. More young people will lose their jobs. More young people will drop out of school. This is exact. As a matter of fact, tomato or cost of food that has inflation rates that currently is 40% will be costing towards 60 if we are not careful. If Tinubu continues on these policies in the next 1 year, in the next 2 years, the 70,000 naira slave wage that has just been approved by the president will practically mean nothing. Dollars today is over 1,500.
Thank you very much, Mr. Juwon.
Tinubu continues with this time on this trajectory.
We have to go on a very short break.
The dollars will get to 2,000.
Yes, we have to go on a very short break, Juwon, but when we come back, we'll continue with this conversation and we'll let you speak. I'm also going to redress it for you, Mr. Agedo, to also give us your specific thought on that question that I asked from earlier. But let's do the short break. We'll be back and we'll continue with the coverage of the End Bad Governance protest across Nigeria with our guests here in the studio and some joining us via video chat. We'll be back.
Hey, welcome back. It's day 4 of the hashtag End Bad Governance protest live coverage here on News Central TV. Now, before the break, we're talking to guests in the studio and, of course, on video chat just regarding the protest and, of course, the presidency's speech. The president addressed the nation at 7 a.m. this morning, addressing the protesters and railing out some of the strategies and reforms that his administration is undertaking to steer the nation's economy to greatness. And in the studio with us is Agedo Stephen. He is a protester and, of course, one of the prominent faces at the protest grounds at Ojota at Lagos State. We also have Mr. Femi Lawson, is the SSA on Public Enlightenment to the Ondo State Governor. And also joining us now via video chat is Zikora Ibe, and she's also one of the protesters at the Ojota grounds in Lagos State. Lady and gentlemen, welcome back onto the studio. Now, let me come to you, Mr. Lawson, and I have to ask, right? The demands that the protesters are making. We've seen how Juwon has been very, adamant with his, with the demands, and said these measures that the government is taking, we don't care for time. He's had 1 year. how long is it going to take, But the demands are, they're all interesting. And I would like for you to just speak on them. And very quickly, let me just pull up some of these demands for you. Hopefully we can put that on the screen, from several reforms and initiatives that the government has made mention of. One of them is fuel subsidy removal. They've asked for subsidy to be removed. And the presidency and every expert in the field have said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. It must be removed given the Petroleum Act. It has to be removed. And they've asked for a reversal of fuel pump prices back to the original price. And the presidency has said, we have introduced the CNG, the natural gas initiative to help reduce the cost of transportation for motorists. So there are some initiatives that are being made. What do you make of, the government's reforms and initiative to these demands and the protesters' adamancy to yield?
Well, I think one thing we must all agree is that these changes won't happen overnight. We won't change as Nigerians. These demands by Nigerians, it's been 1 year, But the truth is that for anyone who has lived in this country, I always refer to the past rather. You realize that even if you have given the power to a magician in the last 1 year, no fundamental impact, more than we are saying, would have been made, especially when you look at the damage done to the economy, the damage done to virtually every sector before President Tinubu came. And that is why a lot of us were reluctant in even participating in this election 2023. Because we knew that whoever was coming to inherit Nigeria from Buhari was coming to inherit a very huge burden. So these changes will not happen overnight. But this demand will continue. Nigerians will continue to demand for better life. Nigerians will continue to demand for good governance. But we must also be ready not to wait forever anyway, to follow the processes that may produce these demands. I don't think if we are asking for an end to corruption, we are asking for infrastructure, we are asking for agricultural revolution, we are asking for reverse fuel subsidy, which looks like something impossible at this point. Will this be done overnight? A lot of these issues raised in these demands by Nigerians who are protesting are issues that even have to do with existing laws, and policies that are established by laws and acts. So they are not things that President Tinubu can even sit on television and make pronouncements upon. This is a democracy. Everything must go through processes that are established by law. That nonetheless, the president being the head of government has a responsibility to fast track these processes these policies that this administration is introducing to making life better for Nigeria, especially policies that has to do with, one thing we have left out of these demands, and which I think the government is not addressing enough, is the fact that day in, day out, we are becoming a less productive society. We are becoming a less productive economy. And we are expecting magic. You cannot tackle inflation when your production is almost on a daily decline. You mentioned the price of food the other time. I have a bit of, interest in farming. And a lot of people don't know that. As I speak to you this morning, 40% at least of tomatoes you find in my 12 market here are brought from Ondo State.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to talk about...
I used to think we get more tomatoes from the north and some other parts. And this didn't just happen overnight. It was a process that started just a few months and less than a year back, when there was a deliberate attempt by government to support people to go into that sector of farming. And today, it is crashing the price, not only here, but more in our place. Driving through Ore to Lagos, had to make purchase of some staples. We have this popular food in Ondo State we call pupuru, cassava flour. And at some point, we began to challenge these women who are selling. That you buy at a price today, tomorrow it's, of course, the current reality. And the man called me. I said, it will get to a point that we may not even be able to buy at all. It may not even be available on the table. I said, why? He said, now, the Chinese companies in Nigeria come straight to your farm. Before they wait for us to harvest, we bring it to the market, they buy. Now they go straight to our farms in Ondo State, buy from your farm, and the man who has the cassava want to sell at more profitable price. For you, you want to make gari from his cassava. You're not going to buy as much as the man wants to take ethanol and other, products that are now available in cassava. You see, the factories are all over the place, traveling through Lagos, Ogun State. Those are factories where cassava is now being used to produce a lot of things. But for us, it's about eating akpu and making eba.
Mr. Olufemi.
So now, despite that, we are not producing more to meet the demands. We're rather producing less. And that is why this inflation keeps,
Noted. We have to talk to Zikora Ibe, who we have on a live chat. Zikora, good morning. Once again, welcome on the show here. Now, let's have your thought on this. Now, the president, in his address this morning, talked about the fact that he has to address decades of economic mismanagement. Now, that's a direct quote from his speech. Decades of economic mismanagement. In the past 14 months, he has put in policies to try and amend whatever ills that he found while he came as he came into office. Now, as protesters, is this enough to call for dialogue? Is this enough for the protesters to say, okay, let's wait, let's see if the president is going to do something in the next few, no one knows how long. But what's your thought on that?
First, let me say that the president's speech was unpresidential, disappointing, and unempathetic to the conditions of young Nigerians and even every Nigerian who have continued to suffer for some of his ill-thought policies so far. And when the president says that the economy has been mismanaged even before his time, he is refusing to acknowledge his own role in further worsening what has become a badly managed economy. And I say this because in his speech, he mentioned that he has some CNG policies, to augment the removal of fuel subsidy. And to us, it's like medicine after death. This is a president that came into power, and on the first day of his stand as a president, he did not think through what would be the palliatives to be offered when implementing those sort of policies. He just announced, abruptly that fuel subsidy is gone. And with that announcement, he sent the economy into a tailspin, and we have not recovered until now. And it was like after sending the economy into a tailspin, that's when he now remembered that he ought to put down some palliative measures to be able to cushion the effect of what he has just done. So in that sense, it would seem thoughtless. It would seem, unplanned. It would seem like somebody that doesn't have an idea of how the economy runs and how the economy works and what should be done. Even if you were to carry out, some of those policies you thought are important. We have also repeatedly had the president say that the removal of fuel subsidy was necessary because only a few are benefiting from something that ought to benefit the masses. And we think that this is wrong and ridiculous. If a few people are stealing and siphoning the money of this country that is supposed to benefit the larger mass, why should the larger mass then suffer for the irresponsibility of a few? And this is what we talk about when we say end bad governance. We say that the few people who have decided to make this country not sweet for the mass should be prosecuted, should be investigated, should be called to account, and so that the large mass of the people can enjoy what it is of the bountiful wealth in the country. So when the president keeps saying that there are policies that he has taken, for instance, the student loan, we say that this sort of policies are also policies that do not help us in any way. The student loan, as soon as it was announced, plus the inflation in the country and the economic hardship, it sent all the public universities and even private universities increasing their fees across the country in an effort to benefit from the largesse of the student loan. But we say, what is the need of a student loan that doesn't guarantee quality education? Students will take a loan to go to a school where they can't even sit in a good classroom, where they do not have basic amenities to further their education like research facilities, where they do not have basic infrastructure to make their living conditions better while in school. We have seen students in Benin the University of Benin protesting against the lack of electricity in their hostels. They cannot read, they cannot write, they cannot read at night in their hostels. They cannot study because there is no electricity. We have also seen the same thing from the University of Ibadan, where students protested at least 3 weeks ago, protesting that the living conditions that would excite them to be students is not favorable to them in their school. And these are schools that are collecting loans. So if students finish collecting that kind of loan of 1 million naira per session, 500,000 per session, and the loan does not translate into quality education, who are we fooling?
All right. So,
and don't forget, this loan only applies to students who are already in school. It means that the mass majority of Nigerians and poor students who are unable to meet up with the increasing school fees that we have seen across the country cannot even access the loan until they are students. What it means that many people will not be able to go to school in the coming years. So what exactly did Mr. President do? Which is why we are asking for grants for students and not loans that impoverish them further.
Zikora, I'm very intrigued, right? And I'm curious about what you said. In your first submission, your opening statement was the president's speech was insensitive to Nigerians and to the entirety of the citizens. And so I have to ask, what then should his speech look like? What should he have sounded like? If you were the presidency right now addressing protesters and Nigerians, what would you say? Because I have to point out that he addressed the protesters and said that I empathize with you and I also stand with you. He also said to those who had lost their lives and mentioned the states, he said, I extend my bereavement as well, and my heart goes out to those who have lost their lives. And he says, I hereby call the protesters back. Let's go into dialogue. Isn't that empathetic enough? And if it's not, what then should his speech have sounded like?
Let me say that it was too sad that it took the president this long to make that speech.
Again, Zikora, it's too long.
Yes,
3 days. 3 days, right? Now, if you and I hate
it wasn't 3 days. Let me speak. It wasn't 3 days. The protest had been ongoing online. Conversations around the conditions of the country had been ongoing online, and people expected the president to address this even before people moved to the streets. Then people moved to the streets and continued to agitate. But it took the president 3 days to come down from his high horse to talk to citizens. And by speaking to citizens, he did not try to empathize with their conditions. He did not try to empathize with the material situation that pushed them out to the street. Instead, he started with blaming protest organizers and protesters for the violence that has been seen across the country. And who caused this violence? We saw security operatives deal high-handedly with innocent protesters across the country. We say this for a fact because for states where security operatives have remained empathetic and recognize their position to hold the ground and to be responsible, protests have remained peaceful across those parts. And the protesters have acknowledged the police role in calming situation and in calming tensions around. But in places where the police felt that they had the power, to suppress to suppress protesters, we saw what happened. We saw the chaos that ensued after they used maximum force. This the president did not address. Instead, the president, in his third paragraph, blamed protesters for the violence that has erupted across some parts of the country, and we think that this is not empathetic. Further down in his speech, he said that young people should not allow themselves to be utilized as elements to entrench an unconstitutional order, or should not be allowed to be told that the country is not working for them. This is ridiculous. He minimized the pains and realities of people. People had it good for them. Be out in the streets.
All right, thank you very much, Zikora.
Even a protest.
Thank you very much, Zikora.
Zikora, many thanks. Juwan, I would like for you to also make a submission to that as well. Please go ahead.
Yes, I agree completely with Zikora that the president's speech was not sympathetic to the protesters at all. As on the contrary, it was a blackmail on people simply demanding for good governance. Because most of the violence that was, most violence that were recorded in the course of this protest were orchestrated by security forces. We have a situation, we see the situation in Abuja. It saw live bullets and tear gas. We saw the unfortunate situation in Kano, as I mentioned earlier. Even the president's speech, dismissing ethnic bigotry, that is very correct, but we think but we also think that it was an hypocritical statement. The president, if the president indeed is not, if the president is actually sympathetic against the use of ethnic vitals against Nigerians, a spokesperson, Bayo Ononuga, should have been the first person to be fired, because there is no one that did all form of ethnic profiling, especially against the people from the Southeast extraction, than Bayo Ononuga. So this should be the first person the president should have fired in a speech. Also, the police who shot at protesters in Kano and killed them, including women and children. The video we saw yesterday, very tragic. The speech should have held them accountable to some of the violent crimes they committed in Abuja, in Kaduna. This is what was expected of the president. But of course, as I said earlier, his speech is mere window dressing, glossed over the issues, embarrassed the protesters without addressing their demands.
Okay, thank you very much, Juwon. I'm going to come back to the studio here with us, Mr. Agedo. Much of the sentiments that have been shared by our two guests online here, Juwon and Zikora, kind of like paint a grimmer picture after even the address by the president. Well, they're not altogether with it. How much of this are we expecting to see when it comes to the protests, and how is it going to affect the protests come today, perhaps maybe when protesters hit the street? How much of this sentiment will we see in the protests going forward?
The protests will still continue because the president have not really made the demands across board. The protests will continue. I've said it earlier on. The Congress will sit down and review the president's statement. I will agree with my sister, Ibe. The president's statement today is unpresidential. It shows he's not really, in quote, feeling the feeling, looking at the feelings of common Nigerians on the street. For Christ's sake, we are talking about hunger strike. Hunger.
What should the president have addressed to absolutely specifically touch on that demand? Now, the hunger that the nation is feeling. What did you expect him to say directly?
There is this saying that I said, to whom much is given, much is expected from. I want to hear the president to say, subsidy have been returned. I want to hear the president to say, custom duty have been reduced. I want to hear the president to say, look at what's happening in the National Assembly, their take-home, their wardrobe allowance, vehicle. The president bought brand new jet, and Nigerians cannot boast of one bag of rice at home. Far back, before this government came in 2015, how much is bag of rice? Hunger is an uniform stimulus all over the world. You can't pretend of hunger, for Christ's sake. Why I said earlier on that, the president, for the fact that he didn't meet to address Nigeria, I'm happy. But what I expected from him, all the demands, none is being treated. What the president was just saying is trying to shift away from responsibility. Secondly, trying to campaign their achievement. We are not talking about achievement now. We are talking of what really brought us to the street.
Regarding the jet, that's not absolute yet. However, he did address food. He talked about the fact that there have been deployments made financially to help aid farming, agriculture, automation, and all of that. It was all there inside of his speech. Yes, go ahead, please.
You see? No, continue your talk.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I pointed
you
those
said
out.
he addressed our
Agriculture.
agriculture.
Yes.
Before now, the Minister of Agriculture have said a lot of promises, sharing of fertilizer and what have you. But we are still buying a mudu of gari for thousands of naira. So all the president said today, it's not a yardstick sad to really treat the demands. Some people sat down and said, oh, what's our problem? And they listed it. None of the demand the president addressed. He was just saying, this is what we have achieved. This is what we are. Your achievement that is not affecting a common Nigerians.
Regarding minimum wage, the presidency talked about, or from before the protest, talked about the fact that we had to borrow much to be able to accommodate the 70,000 naira minimum wage that is going to go into action, that's being put into action. Now, that's coming from nowhere because it's on loan. Now, regarding removal of fuel subsidy, noting that they had no, there was no arrangement for it in the budget. If it is to be put back, how would we suffer that? Where would those monies come from, where we have no allocation for it inside the budget? These are very detailed details that perhaps maybe should also come into the discussion, and maybe the Congress should sit on a round table suggestion.
My brother, you are not, don't let me see you as a defense to the government. There is money in government. Let government take responsibility now. They should cut their cost. There's a lot of allowances, sitting allowance, presidency, House, National Assembly, State Assembly. They should take responsibility. There's a lot of things that is going on in this government. Whether you like it or not, government of Tinubu have shows a sign of corruption. At least one person have been indicted that we can see. God knows a lot of shenanigans that will be happening on that ground. So they should just take the responsibility. Either is inside the budget or not, the cost of running governance for their own personal benefit should be cut down so that an average Nigerians on the street can enjoy the benefit of democracy, quote unquote.
Mr. Lawson, let me ask you, I mean, from all of the submission from Zakora to Sanyaolu and now to Stefan in the studio, one thing is certain, trust deficit. The public clearly doesn't trust the government. And I would like for you to address this. You are the SSA on public enlightenment to the governor. How best can government close that gap and make the public trust them again?
You see, the culture of communication between government and citizens is something that we have always lacked in Nigeria. In the past, government have to wait until issues, snowball into crisis before we start calling for dialogue. But I've always been of the opinion that we should be open to dialogue. I've participated in a lot of struggles in this country, from the pro-democracy day through even the successive governments in Nigeria. I've been part of so many protests in this country. And every protest I've always ended on the table, even if there are policy proclamations by the president in that speech, we'll still go to the table. And so I don't think protesters should leave out the option of dialogue, just like the two young people are trying to act. A lot of these things, like I said, are not things that can be achieved by mere proclamation by the president. Though he's the head of government, he has taken responsibility. I read the speech, and I don't want to totally agree that the president didn't take responsibility for some of this, including the violence that broke out in some part of. And I think we must also be sincere that even while planning protests, we have often been conscious of establishing the fact that our protests must be peaceful. We've done that a number of times, and one of the reasons why young people were able to stay for the number of days that NSAS lasted until that unfortunate attack on protesters that led to subsequent violence, was because protesters were largely peaceful all over the country. Even when protesters were assaulted by some sponsored thugs, then they remained peaceful. And that was why they could stay that number of days on the streets. But could we say the same thing of the visuals we saw from Maiduguri, where, protesters were
looting?
No, throwing stones at the commissioner of police. Or what we saw in Kano, do we say it's also part of what we planned? So we must be clear and we must understand that it is not government or government infrastructures alone that were attacked in Kano. People's, private businesses were invaded, just in the same manner some, people did aftermath of the violence in NSAS. People, including pharmacy stores, you'll be amazed about the visuals coming from Kano. So we cannot, because we want to, affirm the right of the people to protest and justify harassing, on innocent citizens by people who are claiming to be protesters. Protest will mean a fundamental right. Nigerians will continue to protest, demand for good governance, even after this government.
So
nobody can stop that.
But trust is still an issue.
Trust, the only way you can build trust with citizens is by continuously engaging. Why should government wait? Well, like I always give an instance of, citizens were expressing themselves online, were not comfortable with this. I saw a lot of persons who are members of the National Assembly going to their constituency to engage their people. In all this, some governors have not even made a statement. And these are governors who the president claimed in the speech he has given states, and the FCT about 570 billion to cushion the effect of some of this hardship that Nigerians are complaining about. Some governors are not even acting as if they are aware of what citizens are saying. But some have taken it upon themselves, including the governor of Ondo State, that, no, let's talk. The market traders, what are the issues? The students, for the first time in over 8 years, students are beginning to get bursary and scholarship as a product of this same, August protest, in Ondo State. It was in the course of the engagement, that the governor approved immediate payment of bursary and scholarship for students of Ondo State origin. That has been missing for over 8 years. No government thought about that. But that planned protest, has given birth to a result. And other sectors also that the governor took, leading practically by himself, not setting up a committee or sending, intermediaries, to address days prior to the commencement of the protest.
Not just on the state, also in Delta State as well. And you are correct that these are coming off of the happenings currently. Yes. However, how much of the people, or the citizens, actually know that they have these to their advantage? They don't know about these allocations. Most of them don't know about these allocations that have been given to the states. They don't have a connection between themselves and their local government. What is the government in your state, for instance, doing to educate the people to their rights, to educate them so they know what their responsibility is when it comes to nation building itself, what they know, what they should be aware of when it comes to keeping their nearest member of governance, which is the local government, in check? Do they know anything? Are you, as part of the government, also aiding them, educating them in knowing their rights? Ondo
State government is very deliberate. But the whole essence of the creation of the Public Enlightenment Office by the government itself is to openly engage the citizens and keep them informed.
And how do you do that?
Doing that is part of what we've been doing over the last couple of days. We must let the citizens know opportunities that are available, the resources that are available within the state. A lot of government don't want to do that because of issue of accountability. When you are transparent, when you are accountable to your people, you should let your citizens know that
So how does Ondo State do it?
Ondo State is doing that through the Public Enlightenment Bureau, you understand, which the governor has created, where I'm the senior special assistant. So Ondo State government is openly engaging citizens, telling them what is available in government, and also the responsibility. Are
these like classes or forums or,
Of course, we do that to the mass media, and like I said, we have physical engagement with key sectors, almost every sector. If you are not a student, you fall in the youth category. If you are not a Christian, you be a Muslim, or as the case may be. If you are not a member of the trade union in Ondo State, you be a part of the market, women group. If you are not, every sector that you can find yourself in Ondo State are being engaged by government.
Well, let me, because we're pressed for time, and this time I just want to come to our guests that are on video chat, and that's Mr. Juwon and also Ms. Ibe. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the protest, this is day 4 of the protest. The president has addressed the nation, and you have said that although in spite of the address, it is not enough and has not met the demands or addressed the core issues of your protest. So I have to ask, what will day 4 of the hashtag End Bad Governance protest for Lagos State look like? Juwon?
Oh, yes. So already today, protesters are already converged in Nojota, and they will be, majorly it's going to be people, Christians and Muslims, in observing their service at the barricades, and they are going to be, and they'll keep protesting. That's all. Just as we've been doing over the past 3 days in Ojota. Also, and we'd also want to seize this moment to also insist that we also be reiterating some of the demands that we have long presented to the president over the past 2 weeks on the social media. Its demands are circulating everywhere on the social media, and has been articulated all the time at the protest ground. But however, I want to also speak to some of the so-called achievements of the president, because I keep you said something that trust is a major problem we have with government. That is very true. But another major problem is Tinubu's policies, the President Tinubu's policies himself. So if the president thinks that 70,000 naira minimum wage is a smart decision, then he should place himself, his entire cabinet, and members of the National Assembly on 70,000 naira minimum wage. If he thinks that removal of fuel subsidy is a very smart decision, then himself, his entourage, all government officials should stop living on public funds to fuel their cars. They should start buying fuels with their money, like Nigerians are doing. If the president feels that electricity tariff and his policies that have vocation fighting inflation is okay, then they should simply stop living on public coffers and start experiencing exactly what Nigerians are going through. If his policies on education is that smart, then all government officials, all of his entourage should cease completely from seeking education overseas. These are the issues we are talking about. We are talking about that the president, the entire government officials, they are completely disconnected from the lives of an average Nigerian. And this is exactly the reason they continue to think the policies they make are smart policies. If they are so smart, they should be bounded by those policies themselves.
All right. Now, Jawan, many thanks. Let me come to you, Zakora. Your take. We'll press for time. A minute, please.
Yeah, so it's clear. I completely agree with Juwon. It's clear that this is going to be a long struggle, and we have seen government representatives talk without action. And if you say that citizens should tighten their belts, you should also tighten your belt. So we've seen the Senate president say that why citizens are agitating, that they would be eaten, which is an insult. So the same thing Juwon has said. The president has largely unaddressed what are the core demands of protesters. And until these are addressed, I do not think that people's grievances can be minimized. So the best thing is for the president to go back to his drawing book and address them. And I just want to make one quick point. I know the gentleman journalist sitting with you, he said the protesters should go back and work on the details of how the president can reverse some of those policies because they cannot be easily reversed because they are now, in law. But the truth is that he is passing a responsibility that should have been that of the presidency and his cabinet. At the time they took all those decisions, they never had any consultation with the Nigerian mass. They took those positions at their personal whims, and they just announced it without any feeling, any thought of how it was going to affect the economy. So we are saying to them to go back to their drawing boards and sit down like thinking people and redress those challenges, those things that they have pronounced that have sent the economy into a wreck. Go back and sit down at your table if you have a cabinet that really thinks, and redress them.
All right. Zakora, many thanks. Let me come to you, Mr. Lawson, as well, and ask you, as we go into day 4, what would be your call to the government? You are an SSA to the governor of Ondo State, and if you were to speak to the government in this matter, when it concerns public enlightenment and the protesters, what would be that message?
Now that President Tinubu has opened the door for dialogue, I want to believe that Nigerians will embrace it, but this must not be limited to the president. Other stakeholders in government should also do the same. States should engage citizens. There are protests all over the states, in rivers, we've seen in Delta and some other parts of the country. The states must also engage with it. Some of our issues may not be the same. The demands may vary, based on where you find yourself as a citizen. So that is why we cannot leave this alone. to Abuja. And that is one of the problems that brought us here is the fact that Abuja carries so much burden on itself. Even in some, for me, I don't think the federal government has any business in agriculture. That means Federal Minister of Agriculture in Abuja sitting there to me, leave the business of agri to the state. You know, so some of those issues have to be addressed using this opportunity by the president himself. And of course, like I said, the door of dialogue must remain open. Listen to what people are saying, engage them. And I'm sure we can find the kind of situation we found in Ondo State, where people practically, you know, are going about their normal businesses because they feel they're already talking with government and government is making promises in some places, no, you know, making their demand.
Adedo, any last final words for today?
My final words is straight to Juwon. You should not get my word out twisted. I never choose a stance with the government. I'm only saying I'm happy that for the fact that the president came outside. Secondly, is for the president to let ceasefire on this protest. At least the demands, we are not saying it's a rocket science now for the government to do our demands. At least you reach some key points in what we listed down. It will heal a lot of wounds. That is my final say.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And also, lady, thank you so much. We had Ms. Zikora Ibe. She is a human rights activist and also one of the prominent voices for the hashtag End Bad Governance. We also had Mr. Sanyaolu Juwon, who's also one of the protesters at the Ojota ground. And here in the studio, we had Agedo Stephen. He's also part of the protesters. And of course, Mr. Femi Lawson, SSA Public Enlightenment to the Ondo State Government. Thank you again, once again, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.